Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about my winter reading wrap-up. So I'm going to start today with, I have them in front of me, the Winternight Trilogy by Katherine Arden. I read these most of January, so I kind of thought I'd wrap them all up because I finished them. I finished the last one kind of the beginning of February, I believe. So the first one is The Bear and the Nightingale, which follows Vasya and her family in medieval Russia. I actually heard about this series on many YouTubers' channels, and it really sounded like something that I was going to love. It was medieval Russia, which for some reason I really like. I don't know why. I really don't know why. But anyway, it was great. It was a fairy tale. It was kind of the story of paganism versus Christianity as kind of the times were changing, and the fight between the Tartars and the what are now Russian people. So the first one was definitely kind of a building novel. I love character work. So for me, the first one just gripped me entirely. I found myself like dreaming about this family, and there were a lot of really cute characters. The whole thing was just great. You really didn't, at first I wasn't really sure what everyone was talking about as far as Vasya as a main character, because there was so much of her other siblings and family. She really developed in the second book. The second book is The Girl in the Tower. This one I would say I really enjoyed, but there's a lot of tropes in it that I feel are really very common. I think that like there's nothing in here that is original. I think it's written really, really well. I think it's just beautifully done. I think it's enjoyable. It was, I would say, a fairly fast read. But it bloomed in the second book. The second book is The Girl in the Tower. This is where Vasya as a main character just erupts and is amazing. I adore her. There's so many characters that I just absolutely latched onto. I loved Solovey. He was amazing. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, and I don't even care. After this one, I was hooked. I already halfway through, I had already bought the third one because I was just like, I knew as soon as I was done with this one, I was going to want to start on the next one because it was so good. I was so done. Like I said, there's still nothing in this one that is super original, I would say, but it was done so well, and the character work in these is outstanding. I also really like Russian history, and it actually portrays a really interesting part of Russian history. Followed again, and honestly by the third one, I was like, I don't even care if I want this story to pick up exactly where it left off, and it does exactly that. Everyone just keeps getting better and better. Vasya as a character is growing and evolving, and is just better and better, and this one had some parts in it that, I laughed, I cried. I felt so much with this one, and I loved every bit of it. I am going to probably be rereading this one fairly soon just because it was so wonderful. Really, this entire series just absolutely lives up to everything that everyone has said about it. It is outstanding. It is 5 stars all the way through. It was really, really nice. It also is not insanely long. For a fantasy series, especially, I really like history. So for me, historical fantasy is so right up my alley. I really, honestly, if that's kind of your cup of tea, pick this series up. You will not be disappointed. It is, thought it was awesome. Okay. So after that, I kind of took a break, and I like to read a lot of different things. So another one that I'd been hearing about a lot on BookTube that I really thought was interesting was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. And if you watch my video, I'm pretty sure I never actually got that title right for the life of me. Sorry. I'll work on it a lot. For me, this ended up being a 4-star read, and it is about this guy who wakes up in this large British mansion, basically, and he starts to kind of live this life, and then realizes that he's in this somewhat simulation where he has to live 7 different days in 7 different bodies. And this you start to learn really on, so I don't think it's a spoiler. But you start to live 7 different days in 7 different bodies to figure out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. And as you start to, you're kind of in the dark a little bit at first on this one. And I will say, I read this one via audiobook, so it'll be up in one of these corners. But because I read it via audiobook, it's kind of easy for me to listen to somewhat longer stretches at a time. And by that, I mean something like an hour or 2 at a time. For me, I think that really helped because you're so in the dark as a reader in the beginning half of the story that it can be really confusing to follow if you're not kind of into it and sort of understanding what's going on. I, as a reader, tend to like things where you're somewhat in the dark or you're confused a lot of the way through. I think it just makes for interesting storytelling. This to me felt a little bit like Agatha Christie mixes with maybe some sci-fi elements. I thought it was kind of like Westworldian, I suppose, with the sort of life simulation. I thought it actually got really interesting and I really appreciated it. I don't necessarily read a ton of mystery or whodunits, I suppose, but I really like ones that are not obvious to you. I mean, clearly, who doesn't? That's kind of the whole point with the genre, I feel like. But this one had some really interesting elements that I don't know that I'd seen before. I also really like that, as you're kind of watching, you start to distrust all of the characters. I think it really makes for an interesting reader experience going through. So for me, that was a 5-star read. You can actually check out my video. I did a full review on that one. It is link in my channel. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to hear more about my thoughts on that one. I also add my star ratings on Goodreads. I'm not great about putting reviews on there. I don't know. Maybe I'll work on that. Maybe that'll be a thing I do. Who knows? We'll see. But you can see my star rating on there. If you want to follow any of my books, I will link it down below in the description. Okay, so after that, I read The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper by Hallie Rubenhold, and I will also put that cover somewhere here and link in the description below. That is a nonfiction story. I gave it a 5-star rating. It is definitely feminist literature. I also like true crime and crime throughout history, just in general. I think there's a lot of interesting elements surrounding kind of Jack the Ripper. This, by far, is the best piece of media around it for what I think, at least. I have a full video on this book because I just absolutely loved it. It was a different take. It doesn't talk at all about any of the murders that Jack the Ripper committed against these women. It just talks about the lives of these women, and it gives humanity to something where it turned a carnal, disgusting act into something very real, and it gave these women's lives. There's such depth in their lives. It was gripping. It was actually, I did this one audio as well. And mostly just because I had a free credit and it sort of worked out. And this was one I'd heard a lot of buzz about. I heard it on 2 of my favorite YouTubers' channels, and I really wanted to check it out as well because they had said such amazing things about it. I've also really been wanting to kind of read more, I guess, feminist literature, and this was sort of right up my alley. It was awesome. It was a social commentary on Victorian era women and the way that they're perceived in society and were perceived at the time. And it was outstanding. I mean, I just have nothing but amazing things to say about it. And that's really horrible as a kind of review, but you need to go check it out and listen to it if that's anything that you're interested in. It was crime told in a different way, and it was so humanizing and outstanding. It was a really great I honestly, I was really happy with what I read. I read fantasy, I read like a mystery thriller, I read nonfiction, and my last one actually is a comic volume 1 series. It is Isola. This is written by Brendan Fletcher and drawn or illustrated by Carl Kerschel. This is chapter 1. This encompasses the first 5 volumes. I believe it is a teen series. Just upon first view, one of the things I will say about it is it was just absolutely beautiful. The art in this is stunning. It wasn't a very dialogue heavy story. Maybe that's just because it was, I don't necessarily want to say it's because it was teen, because I don't know that I believe that that's true. This just did not happen to be a very dialogue heavy story. Most of it I found was told via some of the images and the pictures, and I thought that was a really interesting element. I found it enjoyable, I will say. I'm going to give it a 3-star review at the moment, or I gave it 3 stars at the moment, because I felt like at the end of the 5th volume, I was still confused about a lot of what was taking place. There was a lot of things for me that felt implied, and I just wanted a little bit more clear direction. From what I gather, though, from what I understand of the story at the moment, though, I really like. There was actually one thing that I thought that I really, really, really liked about it, actually. Okay, so there's a lot of blue and greens and vivid imagery and vivid coloring in this that I thought was lovely. But you can see in this image, when they switch to a kind of spirit world, which I can't necessarily explain because I don't know that it's been explained enough yet, but you can see that there's a stark coloring change, and I really liked that. They used a lot of color to show different times and elements and spaces in the story, and I thought that was a really interesting, cool element that I'm really excited to see how they move forward with it. So I think at the moment with the first 5 volumes, it's a little too soon to tell. I'm going to go 3-star at the moment. But check this one. More stuff is going to come from this one a little bit later on, so check back on my channel for something like that. Anyway, this has been my winter wrap up. I read 6 books in the last 2 months or so, kind of varying here and there. 2 audio and 1 comic and a 3-part book series. So those are my stats for the winter if anyone's interested. I like to keep track of it because, I'm just weird like that. But yeah, thanks for catching up with me. I'm going to if you want to check out any full reviews for any of those, I will have them down in the description of my channel. Be sure to like and don't forget to press the little bell. Thanks so much. See you guys next time.